everybody, my name is Rich Frascone, and I'm here to introduce you to Who's Telling the Truth, the show where we want to dig into the media's questions and find out if they're being factual or fictional. We need your help. We need to find out who's telling the truth. Hey everybody, how's it going? Uncle Rich here for Who's Telling the Truth. Today is, it's June 3rd. Almost 19. You guys can see that I've been wounded, you know. So I wanna play on the sympathy card. This is one of the things that you have to look forward to when you get old. I never had a problem with my shoulder in my life, but I want to tell you, I've had 2 back operations. I'm a cancer survivor who's had his hip resurfaced. And out of all that stuff, this is by far the worst. And, I ended up at the hospital. And I honestly have to say, the hospital I was flabbergasted. I got there at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. And there was actually 3 or 4 parking spots in front of the emergency room. I walked into the emergency room. There was nobody there. Nobody except for a guy sweeping the floors. So the girl, took my information. They brought me right in. And an hour later, I was being seen, but the funny thing was, when I first got into the hospital, they ask you a series of questions. And the first question that they asked me was, have you been threatened? And I looked at the girl, a woman, in stunned amazement. And I said to her, did you just ask me if I'd been threatened? And she goes, well, it's obvious you haven't been threatened. But I said, I can't believe that you asked that type of question. But the more I thought about it, it almost made sense. And, but anyway, I said to the girl, there was 2 girls there now, and they were taking my blood pressure and all the other good stuff. And I said, so this must be proof that Obamacare works. And I want to tell you, they weren't too happy talking about Obamacare. And why, I'm not quite sure, But I don't know if you guys are keeping up to pace on what's been going on. But now with Obamacare, different hospitals have to post the charges that they charge people. So let's say you're going to go to hospital X and your kid needs a tonsillectomy. Well, hospital X might charge you $5,000. You go to hospital Y, they might charge you $50,000. Why the discrepancy? What could be so different? And I mean, as you start to look at this, you're going to start to see a lot of this stuff that even the insurance companies agreed to pay. So, I mean, it looks like with Obamacare, we're starting to kill the golden goose. And the golden goose is all the extra money that the insurance companies and the hospitals and the doctors can promote. This is all the money that they lose because they have to publicly announce their rates. And they're going to look like a bunch of crooks. Now, the first clip we're going to do tonight is on Obamacare. And I'm sure you've seen the commercials where it's for a book for Obamacare 911. And they're selling it at a ridiculously cheap price. And I'm saying to myself, most of this stuff is free and it's available online. Why would I want to pay for it? So anyway, we're going to run a little clip now just on the Obamacare, which is going to be clip number 2. So, John, if you could set that up for us, and we're going to show you exactly what's going on with Obamacare, and then we'll get into our regular routine. But this sling gives me the right to kind of break the mold for tonight's show. So, John, let's take a look at the Obamacare clip.
I was watching Fox News the other day, Fox So-Called News, which I do just as a kind of exercise in investigation and figuring out what's going on, and goes to commercial, and I see an advertisement on Fox News for the Obamacare Survival Guide, and it advertised a website. Now, I'm going to tell you the website because I want you to look at it. I realize that maybe I'm giving this more promotion than it merits. I really doubt anyone's going to buy this on my say-so. In fact, I'm ridiculing the thing.
Highly unlikely.
The website is Obamacare 911. So I went to the website. This is the epitome of fear-mongering and making money off of fear and off stupidity. You go onto the website, and basically they're selling for $4.95 plus shipping and handling, which is about another $4, the Obamacare Survival Guide. And it says, are you prepared to survive Obamacare? Warning, what you don't know about Obamacare could hurt you. And it says that in the book you're going to find all sorts of stuff written in simple language. Because of course, Louis, if you're going to sell something that's going to be specifically targeted at people who would be susceptible to those fear tactics, it had better be written in simple language, ladies and gentlemen. That they are doing right. They are using the right type of language.
And without nuance.
And without nuance. And it talks about how to survive Obamacare's threats to Medicare, your responsibilities and potential penalties under the new laws, a new excise tax on Cadillac health plans, a new Obamacare capital gains tax, which begins in 2013, adding a 4% surcharge on certain income groups. Now, here's the thing. This is tied in with Newsmax. And you actually get some great bonus gifts. If you pay the $9 for the Obamacare Survival Guide, written in simple language, ladies and gentlemen, you get 2 bonus gifts. One is 2 months of Health Radar, the popular health advisory newsletter from Newsmax. Okay? And your other bonus gift is 3 months of Newsmax magazine. Just so you know, to make it easy for you, they'll continue billing you for your Newsmax subscription on an ongoing basis unless you don't want that. That's nice of them.
Yes.
Because again, simple language means it's probably better just to bill you, and then you cancel if you don't want.
We're in a very, very bad place.
Yeah.
When things have to be advertised as being written in simple language.
Right. The target market here, I understand. They go to Fox News because it's conservatives, but it's more than that. It's stupid conservatives. Who else would buy this? There's plenty of free. Let's assume that they're being honest and saying Obamacare is complex, and it's good to have a guide for it. There's plenty of free guides, including one provided by the government, which in very simple language says, what does this mean for the plan I have now? What is the penalty for not having coverage? The guides exist. So this is marketing to stupid conservatives. That I think, Natan, do you agree that's the target market here?
Absolutely. I mean, the policies that the Affordable Care Act includes in its major provisions are conservative ideas that came out of the Heritage Foundation and other Republican thinkers. So
yeah.
if it were truly marketed towards conservatives, it would be a how to implement Obamacare, not,
it was their idea,
not how to
Louis.
survive it.
Yeah. If you look at this and you really think to yourself, there's got to be something in this pamphlet that people really don't know about.
Right.
That no one else really knows. I really need this valuable information.
I'm going to pay $9.
Wow.
We're really regressing as a country, aren't we?
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
Yes and no.
The fact that this makes money.
Obama got elected, then he got elected again.
It's compartmentalized.
Right.
We have areas that are regressing.
Yeah, I just want to point out the fact that Obamacare was passed, was declared constitutional by the Supreme Court, far outweighs this $4.95 book on Obamacare911.com.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah. If nothing else, we can take some comfort in.
You know what really bothers me is how they take advantage of the simple folk. And I mean that. And really, you take advantage of these poor bastards. They tried to trick them into signing up for a monthly newsletter. Of course, the first 2 are going to be free. But they're continually duping these poor people. And I feel sorry for them. And they don't even realize they're being hosed. But it's all part of the, what I call a conspiracy with these Fruit Loops. I mean, these guys don't, they just don't stop. If they can make a penny, they're going to do it. But anyway, normally when we do a show, especially in the beginning, we like to show an American flag. And we like to see if John's going to be on his toes and if he's going to go to video number 1 or if he's going to show. Hey, John, all right. But guys, once again, I don't know if you've been looking, but I've been noticing an awful lot of flags blowing in the area, or, I mean, it's probably because, I keep telling people, and if you want to come back to me, John, it's the old idea with when you see a flag blowing in the breeze, you scooch the guy next to you and you say, hey, what does that represent? And that represents free energy. And that's one of the reasons why I was up in Hartford. So, I brought this sign up to Hartford. And, John, if you come back here, can you see that all right? There's a little bit of a glare there. And this is more or less, the message that I try to get out every week. It's a win-win solution. Very, very simple. And you guys, if you go on YouTube, if you type in W-I-N, not W-I-N-D, W-I-N hyphen W-I-N-D, and they even have it wrong, they have it situation too, you'll see a little 3-minute video that I did in Hartford. And if you can copy and paste it, I would appreciate it if you would drop it on different sites. When you're talking to somebody about windmills and stuff, you say, hey, tell me what Uncle Rich has to say about this, and tell me if he's got anything wrong. And guys, if I was getting anything wrong, I wouldn't be here. Because the first thing I do before I give you any information is I look for verification. And that's the reason, why we have all these question marks here. And I always say to people, where are you getting your information from? Who told you that? This weekend I was watching some videos from Potholder 54. We're going to show him, do a video on Monkton tonight. I don't know how this guy isn't hiding under a rock somewhere. Because I tell you, if I ever made a fool out of myself like he does, I'd be living in another country. I'd be living in a car somewhere. I wouldn't be on TV. And that's why tonight we're going after him with a vengeance. And the reason why is because he's a professional contrarian. This is what he does for a living. He wants to make sure that we keep burning as much fossil fuel as possible. And how do they do this? They create doubt. That's why we always show you. When somebody tells you something, no longer say, who told you that? Say, what are your sources? Where did you get your information from? And make them look stupid. Because you know why? Most of these people that are climate deniers, they don't know anything. All they know is what they've been told. And if they've been told the wrong thing, guess what? They're telling each other the wrong thing. But that's the thing about conservatives. They're such a tightly knit unit, they only whisper between themselves. That's why they were so devastated when they lost the election. They all thought that, what's his name, the fat guy down in Stanford, they say, we're going to win by, Romney's going to win by 10 points. What was his name? Dick, whatever his name is. And yeah, Dick Morris. And just shameful. And you dupe these people. And we spoke about this earlier. The average age of the people that watch the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News is 71 years old. Hey, I'm not going to throw stones, but at 71, you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer anymore, So, I mean, All right, so, once again, there are so many different things that we can do. And, that's why I'm such an advocate for solar and for wind, because there are so many different things. But The next video we're gonna run, I'm gonna pose a question for you. You know, we've seen clips of the movie. What was it, Judy? Shrinking Ice? Chasing Ice. Chasing Ice. And we watched Chasing Ice, and if there is one thing that you can't deny, when you see a glacier that was there 30 years ago that doesn't exist anymore, well, that's got to tell you something's going on. And this next clip we're going to do it comes from Glacier National Park. Now, the one question that I want to ask you, and you guys can respond on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube, or you can call in now. But the one question I want to know, in 20 years, when there's no more glaciers left in Glacier National Park, what are we going to call it? What do we call it? You can't call it Glacier National Park if there's no glaciers there. These are the things that we're going to have to face, and these are the facts that we're going to have to face. And if there's one thing the Republicans and the Conservative Party doesn't like, is facts. You ever want to screw up a Republican? Give them a fact. The one fact that we love to hinge on is the fact that 97% of the climate scientists writing peer-reviewed articles, and that's so important, peer-reviewed articles, 97.3% agree that not only is global warming happening, but it's man-made. Now, unfortunately, that still leaves 2.7% of people that are deniers. But you know what? They're out there. So the thing is, what we want to do is we want to look people right in the eye. What are your sources? Who gave you that information? And you discredit them. And you bitch slap them and you take no prisoners, because this ain't a game anymore. It's not a joke. You know, our kids and our kids' kids are going to be faced with a dilemma. What are they going to do? I mean, you saw what happened with Superstorm Sandy and everything else. This is just the start of this, folks. All right, so now we're going to take a look at Glacier National Park, and while it's running, I want you to think, what are we going to name this? What are we going to call it when there's no more glaciers? And if anybody wants to call in, we'll try to put the phone number up during the clip. All right, John, you're up.
Glacier National Park is an iconic American landscape. Its turquoise waters and jagged mountain peaks, aptly called the crown of the continent.
I think it's a gem in the crown.
Corey Holloway has been a guide in Glacier for 15 years, yet she's already seen the kind of glacial melt that once would have taken a lifetime.
Personally, it's sad. I mean, I have kids that I would love to be able for them to see this at this stage, you know, and it just keeps getting smaller.
Corey took us on a 5-mile hike up to the top of Grinnell Glacier. It used to be one of the park's largest. In 1938, it covered an entire valley, but between 1981 and 2009, it rapidly dissolved. The glaciers have been shrinking since 1850, yet scientists say human-fueled climate change has made the melt quicker and more extreme. Since 1966, 11 of them have completely melted away. It's true that these glaciers would be melting naturally, but scientists believe they'd likely last another 100 years. With the human factor, they say all of these glaciers could be gone in just 10 to 20 years.
We are into something that is very unusual.
Dan Fegre is a scientist with the United States Geological Survey. What changes are you seeing here in Glacier?
The glaciers are only the most obvious. We've seen changes in our snowpack, for instance. They disappeared 2 to 3 weeks earlier. We've had a 50-year decline overall on average of the snowpack. And snow feeds everything that you see here. I mean, all the trees, the streams and so forth are all directly impacted by the snowpack.
That water is a lifeline for the animals that call this place home, such as bighorn sheep and moose. Hotter summers are also making the forest drier, leading to more extreme wildfires. How different does this park look 20 or 30 years from now?
It'll still be, you know, a terrific landscape to come and enjoy, but it will have been changed by climate change.
While some may argue about how much humans are to blame, there is no debate that what we are witnessing is the twilight of the glaciers. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Montana.
Now, guys, you'll notice that that was done by CBS, part of the Main Street media. And I love the way Fox is always on an island by themselves, being the only deniers in town, and how they're the only ones. And I tell you, I wish I could have had a little more time this weekend, because I did have some clips that I had some issues with and I couldn't get up. But what we're going to do is, we tried to link, the past couple of weeks, we tried to link the wild weather with climate change. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you some other stuff from the Main Street media. So, John, we're going to go to video number 4 now, which is a link between climate change and extreme weather. And I believe this is NBC. Let's hear what they have to say.
Caution. It is vitally important not to make connections. When you see the shots of rubble from Joplin, Missouri, you should not wonder, is this somehow related to the tornado outbreak 3 weeks before it in Tuscaloosa, Alabama? Or the enormous outbreak a couple weeks before that, which together comprised the most active April for tornadoes in U.S. history? No, that doesn't mean anything. It is far better to think of these as isolated, unpredictable, discrete events. It is not advisable to try to connect them in your mind with, say, the fires burning across Texas, fires that have burned more of America at this point this year than any wildfires have in previous years. Texas and adjoining parts of Oklahoma and New Mexico are drier than they've ever been. The drought is worse than that of the Dust Bowl, but do not wonder if they're somehow connected. If you did wonder, you see, you would also have to wonder about whether this year's record snowfalls and rainfalls across the Midwest, resulting in record flooding along the Mississippi, could somehow be related. And then you might find your thoughts wandering to, global warming, and to the fact that climatologists have been predicting for years that as we flood the atmosphere with carbon, we will also start both drying and flooding the planet, since warm air holds more water vapor than cold air. It's far smarter to repeat to yourself the comforting mantra that no single weather event can ever be directly tied to climate change. There have been tornadoes before, and floods. That's the important thing. Just be careful to make sure you don't let yourself wonder why all of these record-breaking events are happening in such proximity. That is, why there have been unprecedented mega-floods in Australia, New Zealand, and Pakistan in the past year. Why it's just now that the Arctic has melted for the first time in thousands of years. No, better to focus on the immediate causalities. Watch the videotape from the store cameras as the shelves are blown over. Look at the news anchor man standing in his waders in the rising river as the water approaches his chest. Because if you asked yourself what it meant that the Amazon has just come through its second 100-year drought in the past 5 years, or that the pine forests across the western part of this continent have been obliterated by a beetle in the past decade, well, you might have to ask yourself other questions, such as, should President Obama really have just opened a huge swath of Wyoming to new coal mining? Should Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sign a permit this year allowing a huge new pipeline to carry oil from the tar sands of Alberta? You might also have to ask yourself, do we have a bigger problem than $4 a gallon gasoline? Better to join with the U.S. House of Representatives, which voted 240 to 184 this spring to defeat a resolution simply saying that climate change is occurring is caused largely by human activities and poses significant risks for public health and welfare. Propose your own physics, or ignore physics altogether. Just don't start asking yourself whether there might be some relation among last year's failed grain harvest from the Russian heat wave and Queensland's failed harvest from its record flood, and France's and Germany's current drought-related crop failures, and the death of the winter wheat crop in Texas, and the inability of Midwestern farmers to get corn planted in their sodden fields. Surely the record food prices are just freak outliers, not signs of anything systemic. It's very important to stay calm. If you got upset about any of this, you might forget how important it is not to disrupt the record profits of our fossil fuel companies. If worst ever did come to worst, it's reassuring to remember what the U.S. Chamber of Commerce told the Environmental Protection Agency in a recent filing, that there's no need to worry because, quote, populations can acclimatize to warmer climates via a range of behavioral, physiological, and technological adaptations, unquote. I'm sure that's what the residents of Joplin are telling themselves today.
Did you notice the guy at the very end? I'm not a lip reader, but believe me, I understood exactly what he was saying. I mean, when you're faced with a catastrophe like that, you don't even need to speak English. I mean, what are we doing to ourselves? What the hell is going on here? You know? It's the 1%. We got to burn that oil. You know, all over the world. You know, Germany, Spain, Russia, even China, India. They're starting to make great advances in wind and solar. And I mean, we're all facing this bad weather, you know, the extreme weather, and we're going to just keep piling it on. You know, if you think I'm trying to scare you, you're right. I'm trying to scare you. I'm trying to scare everybody into getting their heads straight and saying, hey, isn't it about time we did something? Let's stop the BS and let's get with the program. All right, John, we're on a roll. Keep it going, kid.
Wild weather, freakish weather, really hot, really cold, really rainy, really snowy. Seems to be happening more frequently these days. Is it because of climate change? Before we answer that question, we have to clear something up, the difference between weather and climate. Weather is what's happening in the atmosphere on a specific day in a specific location, things like temperature, wind, precipitation. Climate is the general condition of the atmosphere over a much broader region over decades of time. Conditions such as warm, or cold, or wet, or dry. However, it only takes a small change in the climate, like a little global warming, to create a big change in the weather. If the rainfall in New York and Boston is above average one year, we might just chalk it up to a normal fluctuation in the weather. But if rainfall stays above average for years on end, then the climate is changing. In fact, scientists have been warning us that the more climate changes, the more likely we are to have extreme weather. We've seen a lot of weird weather events with less than a 2-degree rise in global temperature. Research says we can expect more of these events as the Earth gets hotter. We'll see more tropical rains in drier areas, like Tropical Storm Irene in August 2011, which put northeastern New York and southern Vermont underwater. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture, so more moisture can precipitate out during a storm. We'll see more prolonged heat waves and droughts, like the ones that hit Texas in 2011. That was the state's worst drought in history, and the temperature hit 100 degrees in Dallas on more than 60 days. We can expect long periods of springtime temperatures during the winter, like the extended warmth that hovered over the eastern U.S. in January 2012 and again in March. And, ironically, unusually cold and snowy conditions in winter too, like the snowmageddon that clobbered Washington, D.C. in 2010. So that sums up our long-range forecast. Change the climate, and you change the weather. For Scientific American's Instant Egghead, I'm Mark Fischetti.
Okay, so that was put out by Scientific America. Now, do you think that it would be in their interests to try to distort any of the data or the information? Do you think there would be anything in it for them? Of course not. I mean, you know, their journalistic integrity would be at stake if they told you anything different. We're going to do one more now, and I know this is from today's show because this is on the NBC in the morning show with Matt Lauer, and we're going to show you. Oh, we got a call, folks. Let's see who it is. And We don't have a call. Oh, we have a call. Okay. We'll try to hit the speaker.
Yes, you do.
You have a question?
No, I just have something I want to say.
Absolutely.
Okay, I was watching Moyers and Company one day where they were talking to a climatologist.
Uh-huh.
And he said the easiest way to think about the whole thing is like the human body.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
If the body temperature raises over 98.6, 1 or 2 degrees, you feel terrible.
Right.
If it goes 3, 4 degrees, you've got a fever.
Right.
If it goes more than that, you could die.
Well, that's a nice analogy. And what we're trying to say here, by saying that 97% of the climate scientists agree that global warming is happening, if you brought your child to the hospital and you said, hey, listen, he's got a little bit of a temperature, what should we do? Should we take a look at him or should we send him home? Well, you know, the climate deniers would like to think, he's going to be all right, don't worry about it. But what happens if after a couple of days he got worse? Would you bring him back to the hospital if the people at the hospital say, well, you know, he's really sick, we should take care of him? You can always say, well, there's still 2% of the doctors that say he's not sick. So, I mean, we could play this game forever. You know what I mean? But
I just wanted to throw that out there for people to understand.
I appreciate that, and you know.
And it that way, like the Earth. The Earth is an actual human body that's sick.
Well, let's not say it's an actual human body, but you're making a good
You know what I mean?
analogy.
It's still a living organism, isn't it?
What's that?
I said it's a living organism, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, you're comparing apples to oranges. But listen, I want to thank you for the call because we gotta.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
We gotta forge ahead. Thanks a lot, buddy. All right, now, like I said, last we're gonna go to NBC and the Today Show. But that was a nice analogy. And really, if your kid is sick, what are you gonna do? You gonna procrastinate? Absolutely not. You're gonna take care of it. So why are we messing around? Why are we pretending that things aren't wrong? All right, John, we got to step it up. So let's go to the next video. And this is from the Heartland. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. There are growing concerns over the environment this morning. A new report shows carbon dioxide has reached levels not seen in millions of years. Ann Thompson is NBC's chief environmental affairs correspondent. Ann, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. You know, it's just one number. One day's measurement of the CO2 levels in our atmosphere. It's a number that fluctuates throughout the year, but the amount of CO2 has surpassed a threshold that scientists say signals we are running out of time to reverse the impact of global warming. From the serene setting high atop Hawaii's Mauna Loa volcano, a danger sign. A monitoring station recording the highest daily levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in human history, 400 parts per million.
The rate of change is accelerating, and that's something that I think all of us need to be concerned about.
The amount of carbon dioxide has risen dramatically since the Industrial Revolution, from 280 parts per million to the recent 400 parts per million milestone. Man-made carbon dioxide is produced when we burn fossil fuels, such as coal for electricity or oil and gas to get around. CO2 traps heat in the atmosphere. Too much CO2 and it warms the Earth, changing the climate, causing ice caps and ice sheets to melt, sea levels to rise, making heat waves more intense and storms stronger. But how much is too much? Many scientists say we are rapidly approaching the 450 parts per million that could push climate change beyond the point of no return. But some disagree, saying those fears are wildly overblown.
I think probably in my lifetime we'll surpass 500 parts per million CO2, but it simply should be now recognized it has no bearing on the temperature of the Earth.
A growing number of scientists say it is not a risk worth taking.
Do we really want to play, chicken with the environment when in fact we don't need to?
Now, adding to the problem, carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for decades, which means that reversing the trend will not be an easy task.
And you said we haven't seen levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere like this for millions of years, so just give me a sense what, and I'm not suggesting you were covering it back then, but give me...
There are days when I feel like I was.
It started to come out. I started, this isn't sounding right. Give me a sense what was happening with the planet the last time the levels got this high.
It was actually 3 million years ago, which is about 1 million years before I was born. But the last time this happened, the sea levels were 60 to 80 feet higher than they are today. So just imagine, I mean, most of the Earth was covered with water, or much more. 3/4 of the Earth is covered with water today. Most of it was. So imagine a completely different planet, and it was long before humans were walking the face of the Earth.
All right, Ann Thompson. Ann, thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. And let's go to Savannah.
All right, Matt, thanks. Prince Harry seems to be enjoying his whirlwind tour of the U.S.
Okay, now we're going to come to the part of the show where we get to mock Lord Monkton. And I want to tell you, this guy is a goofball, and he's a paid contrarian. And you know, I've always taught my kids, never, ever pick on somebody for a disability or something that they have wrong with them. Because, you know, you never know if you might be in a similar situation. The one thing that you're going to notice about the so-called, and I can't use both hands for it, that Lord Monkton is not a lord. But he uses the title. Why? Because he's a phony. And what does he want to do? All he wants to do is raise doubt. That's all he wants to do. But we're going to bitch slap the snot out of him tonight. So we're going to start off, we're going to show a convention that he was at when he pretended to be from the Republic of Myanmar. So anyway, just going to be a little tricky, but John, you're going to roll the first 10 and then go.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Assalamu alaikum. Our new council has two small concerns about this process. First, that in the 16 years now that we have been coming to these events, there has been no global warming at all. And secondly, that even if we were to take action to try to prevent global warming, the cost of that would be many times greater than the cost of taking adaptive measures later. So our recommendation, therefore, is that we should initiate very quickly a review of the science to make sure that we are all on the right track. Shukran iktir.
It's for parties.
Oh, this is speaker, sorry. This is the last speaker is not a party. He's NGOs or he representative, you know. So it was confused for me because it was written Myanmar for me. So I thought but when I looked to his face, he's not a Myanmar. So I was correct. So anyway, thank you very much.
Can you believe this guy? Can you believe this guy having the balls to get in front of a whole conference room and pretend to be something that he's not? And why? Because all they want to do is create the doubt. Did you notice the one thing that he said? Global warming hasn't happened for 16 years. And how do we know that's not true? Because Pothole 54 showed us how they took the information and they distorted it and they lied. And he's still banking on that. So now we're going to go to Representative, I believe it's Representative Inslee, and he's gonna wallop Lord Monkton and watch how he sets him up. And I want you to see what a liar and what a you know, I tell you, the words are, he's more than a liar. But anyway, when you see how he sets him up, and you see that he's not a lord, he's a deceitful liar, or he's a very good liar. One or the other. John, roll it.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee.
And I would note there is a dispute about whether we actually landed on the moon, and there is a dispute about whether the Earth is round, and there is a dispute about gravity in some places. But there is no... We'll get to you, Lord Monkton, shortly, but I want to talk to the scientists on the panels first, if that's okay. Thank you very much. Dr. McCarthy, I appreciate you bringing up the ocean acidification issue, which Dr. Jane Lubchenco of NOAA has called the evil twin of climate change. And I'd like you to describe what actually happens to species when they are exposed. And I want to put up a slide that I believe I got from Dr. Lubchenco. This slide basically shows what happens when you put a pteropod, a small creature, in the water. On the left, you see its picture. These are relatively small, and this shows what happens when you put a pteropod in water that will be in the same acidic conditions that will exist in the year 2100 if we do not change our course. So it basically shows that, according to Dr. Lubchenco, the pteropod melts. Its little calcium carbonate structure actually melts. And I just wonder if you can describe what the oceans will look like from an acidity standpoint in the next 100 years if we don't change course, and what that does to the plankton that serves or could do to the bottom of the food chain.
Thank you. This, like a lot of the other change we're talking about, is not simply a difference of one condition to another, but the time period over which it happens. So if we look at changes in the ocean over the last million years, every 100,000 years or so, we saw ice advance, retreat. We saw organisms that lived in the high north moving closer to the equator during the cool periods, moving back on land and in the ocean. In fact, it's interesting, there are very, very few extinctions in that period. That the memory, the genetics of organisms know in their history that being able to accommodate those changes is essential for survival. But when you crank those rates of change up, pH changed during those periods, temperature changed. When you crank those rates of change up 100 or close to 1,000-fold in some cases, then you exceed the capacity of ecosystems to adjust. Now, in this case, the pteropod, I was tempted to put a picture of a colorful animal here. Pteropods are absolutely beautiful animals, and if you could have one here in a beaker, the foot of the mollusk is thin and flaps like a wing. They're called sea butterflies. You ever see them swimming? They're just spectacularly beautiful with this very delicate shell. They're a very, very important part of the food web in the North Pacific, particularly for salmon. We know that the pink salmon depends heavily on the pteropod for its food. Now, it's just one example. I mentioned others. Microscopic plankton, the foraminifera, coccolithophorids, and of course corals are all subject to this same condition. That is, as carbon dioxide is added to the ocean more rapidly than it can adjust. And if this were being added over thousands of years rather than over 100, it would be a whole different story. More rapidly adjust, then the constant tension of the animal of trying to keep its skeletal material, its shell, from dissolving becomes more and more in the favor of water. That is, water pulls those minerals back into solution. So this is the condition. And of course, we know in the past there's been more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We know that in the past pH of the oceans has been different. We also know that there are periods in the past where organisms like this disappeared, that the conditions were not suitable for corals or mollusks to survive. So this is a very important issue.
So I'm told that the waters are more acidic, 30% more acidic than they were in pre-industrial times. What will they be at the end of the century, approximately, if things don't change?
Well, I don't know how to express it in terms of percent, but if you take these extrapolations, as is done here experimentally, you can show what the effect would be of that changing acid-base balance, referred to in the vernacular as acidification. The oceans aren't becoming acid, they're becoming less alkaline, but it will dissolve these minerals.
Thank you. I was impressed. We're here as the House of Representatives to have the state of the science discussed about climate change. And I was impressed that those who have denied the threat this poses to the planet Earth couldn't produce one scientist, not one scientist, to propose a hypothesis to explain what the Earth is undergoing, all the changes we're undergoing now. They produced somebody that doesn't even have a background in scientists. And that's what they produced to try to convince Americans that somehow that this is a big hoax. I think that's impressive or unimpressive, depending on how you look at it. So I want to ask about Lord Monkton's viewpoint and basis for that. Lord Monkton, when did you start serving in the House of Lords? I noticed you brought fraternal greetings from the Mother of Parliaments to Congress, to our athletic democracy. When did you start serving in the House of Lords?
Sir, I have never sat or voted in the House of Lords, as you have probably been informed.
Thank you. So basically, I want to understand. Thank you. You've answered my question.
Yes.
You come here, you call yourself a lord to try to convince the world to ignore something that threatens our grandkids, and you're not even a lord. Now, don't let me finish my question, then I'll let you speak.
Just one moment, sir.
No, Lord Monkton, excuse me, in our athletic democracy, we'll ask the questions and you'll answer them. Thank you very much.
Very well, but you must not misstate, please, sir.
Excuse me. You come to our athletic democracy, sir, calling yourself Lord Monkton. Not only are you not a scientist, you're not even a lord who served in the House of Parliament. Isn't that correct? In the House of Lords. Is it correct you did not serve in the House of Lords?
I think I have already answered that one, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we not only have the deniers who have denied this clear science upon which there is enormous global consensus. They cannot only not produce one scientist to deny this clear consensus, they can't even send us a real lord from the House of Lords. Now, I think that says a lot about the status of this debate, which we should not be having, because we have an overwhelming consensus. And I note that it's not just by these four scientists. Joe Barton, our good friend, asked the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration to review your testimony, Lord Monkton. And this is what they said, quote, "The fact that globally average surface air temperatures has shown no trend or even slight cooling over the last 7 years is not an accurate reflection of long-term general trends. In fact, calculation of a trend over the last 7 years is a gross mischaracterization of the longer-term trend. The last 7 years have been part of a strong warming trend that began in the 1970s, which is attributable to human influences," citing IPCC 2007. During the last 7 years, 6 of the 7 warmest years on record have all been observed based on NOAA's global land and ocean data. Deducing long-term trends over such a short period of time is comparable to estimating the height of a sea swell by looking at the short period waves on top of a swell. Close quote. NOAA, the people who work for our athletic democracies have concluded we don't need a fake lord to tell us not to act. We need real science, and we need us to have a clean energy policy. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman.
You know, whenever you give a good bitch slap, you got to add a bada-bing. He forgot to add the bada-bing. And that was as good as it gets. That was the best, the best backhand, double reverse backhand, bada-bing bitch slap done to perfection. Now, there's an old saying, never kick a man when he's down. Not when it comes to global warming. We got him down, we're going to keep kicking him. And I tell you, getting back to what I was saying before when I told you, I told my kids never to pick on anybody with a disability. Well, you know, when you look at his bug eyes and you look how they're bugging out of his head, and I really think maybe God's putting a little pressure on his brain. No, really, because when you lie this much, I mean, there's got to be something going on there. So anyway, now, let's watch Potholer 54, I'm telling you. When he's down, he just keeps kicking. John, hit it.
I bet my exhausted subscribers will by now be saying, surely there's not still more bunkum to come from Christopher Monkton? Well, afraid so, but I'll cut things short by making this the last debunking video on the error-prone Viscount and just deal with this.
At the moment, the polar ice caps of Mars are melting. There has been warming noticed on the surface of Jupiter, on one of the moons of Neptune, even on far distant Pluto, all at the same time. And why is this? Because astronauts are taking their 4x4s up into space? No, it's because the sun, as we'll see, has been remarkably active.
The obvious question for skeptics like me to ask is, if it's so obviously the sun, why do climate scientists say it isn't? Isn't that worth checking? Well, it turns out, as usual, climate scientists know something that Christopher Monkton doesn't. The planets are not all warming, as I pointed out in a previous video. And solar physicists don't measure the output of the sun by looking at the temperature of the moons of Neptune. We can measure solar irradiance directly and much more accurately from Earth, as Monkton now ably demonstrates.
Now, let's go to this very interesting paper by Sami Solanki. He's one of the most expert solar physicists. He's very balanced. He doesn't take either side in this debate. What he says is the level of solar activity during the past 70 years is exceptional. And the previous period of equally high activity occurred more than 8,000 years ago. We find that during the past 11,400 years, the sun has spent only of the order of 10% of the time at a similarly high level of magnetic activity, and almost all of the earlier high activity periods were shorter than the present episode. So there is clear evidence that the sun...
Why did you stop reading? That's all Monkton gives his audience, and that's all he shows on his screen. He doesn't show them the actual paper, otherwise they might start reading it for themselves. So let's go back to it and see what Solanki and his fellow researchers say in the very next sentence. Although the rarity of the current episode of high average sunspot numbers may indicate that the sun has contributed to the unusual climate change during the 20th century, we point out that solar variability is unlikely to have been the dominant cause of strong warming during the past 3 decades. What Solanki found was that with carbon dioxide levels fairly stable, the sun has been the main driver of climate over the last 11,000 years, as would be expected. And even in the early 20th century, global temperatures correlate very well with varying solar irradiance. If we look at the graph in Solanki's 2003 paper, we can see that global temperatures climbed even higher when solar irradiance climbed to their peak between 1920 and 1950. But since the 1950s, solar irradiance has maintained that high without going any higher. In fact, some researchers say it's even declined slightly. So temperatures should have followed, as they have done for the past 11,000 years. But they don't. Something else is pushing them up. So Solanki's research fits perfectly with what other climate scientists have discovered. For the first time, temperatures are not following the variations of solar activity. Even the charts Monkton uses to try to support his claim that solar activity is causing global temperatures to rise show that cannot be the case. He based this chart on one in this paper by Hathaway and Wilson. Here's the original. It also shows the recent decline in solar activity very clearly based on sunspot numbers. Monkton pressed on with yet another paper he doesn't seem to have read.
But the solar physicists, you might take Scafetta and West, say, in 2008, they attribute 69% of all the recent global warming to the sun. Most solar physicists agree. The International Astronomical Union in 2004 had a symposium on it. They concluded that that was the case. They said we're now going to get global cooling because the sun's turned itself off for a bit.
Whoa. There's too much here to deal with in just one hit. Let's debunk this one error at a time.
But the solar physicists, you might take Scafetta and West, say, in 2008, they attribute 69% of all the recent global warming to the sun.
No, they don't. Scavetta's paper doesn't attribute 69% of warming to the sun at all. It says the sun could account for as much as 69% of warming since 1900.
Most solar physicists agree.
No, they don't. Scafetta and West's maximum figure is at the extreme high end of the range. Most solar physicists put the figure much lower.
The International Astronomical Union in 2004 had a symposium on it. They concluded that that was the case.
Now, this claim was just so extraordinary, you'd have to be a die-hard Monkton groupie not to be sceptical of it. If a major body like the International Astronomical Union had departed from established science in this way, it would be headline news. It would completely undermine a theory that's been at the heart of climate science for over a century. How come I can't find any mention of it except in Monkton's presentations? So I did some digging. I couldn't find a record of the 2004 symposium, either online or at my local university library. Professor John Abraham, who's done a lot of work debunking Monkton, had contacted the Astronomical Union and received a denial of Monkton's claim. But unfortunately, under my own rules, I can't use this as a source. I was going to contact the Astronomical Union myself when someone referred me to a recent TV documentary that spilled the whole thing wide open.
The International Astronomical Union in 2004 had a symposium on it. They concluded that that was the case.
The International Astronomical Union have never agreed this. This argument was put forward by one paper out of 241, submitted to the symposium in 2004.
It didn't represent the view of the whole union, and you said in your talk that it did.
It was the view of the whole union. The International Astronomical Union in 2004 had a symposium on it. They concluded that that was the case.
There was no such conclusion made.
So there was no such paper.
Which you agreed in an email to this gentleman, Spencer David. He put these accusations to you, and you said, you are right. So you admitted that you had made a mistake. Well,
if what I said gives the impression that this was the view of the entire, and that was the word you used, but I didn't in my speech, IAU, then I'm very happy to make it clear that it wasn't the view of the entire IAU.
Okay, so you made a mistake.
So, if you like, I made a mistake.
No, not if you like. This isn't a matter of opinion. It's just plain wrong, like nearly every other Monkton claim.
Graphics, that's good.
In fact, I'm not even going to bother debunking what remains of Monkton's claims.
All right, can they hear me
I
now?
think by now he's been thoroughly
Guys, we kind of did it again.
So how has
well, we didn't allow enough time. But this is the best part of the clip where they show all the lies this guy has perpetuated.
Yep.
And it's just unbelievable. It's one after the other after the other. So remember, in the future, if somebody brings up Lord Monkington's name, you know, just call him. Yeah, he makes a mockery out of the climate deniers because the guy's just a liar. He doesn't know anything about facts. That's why we have all the question marks on everything around here, so that we rely on our sources. It's all about the sources. We'll see you next week, everybody.
I didn't search for tiny mistakes. I simply checked Monkton's claims, and they turned out to be wrong. Anyone can do the same thing. Watch a Monkton video, look up the sources he cites, and check them. The reason so many Monkton fans don't do this isn't because of a lack of resources, it's because of a lack of skepticism. But Eric has more. Monkton made a mistake. Okay, I magnified one mistake. Monkton made 2 small mistakes, that's all. Oh, I magnified 2 small mistakes. Well, I hate to be contrary, as you know. I have a maths physics degree from a Russell Group university. Okay, that may well be, but let's use that maths degree to do a quick refresher course in counting.
Greetings, it is I, the Count.
Monkton says he advised Margaret Thatcher on climate change. He didn't. He says he wrote a peer-reviewed scientific paper. He didn't. He says the Earth has been cooling. It hasn't. He says Olaf Johannesson found that overall Greenland ice wasn't melting. He didn't. He says there's been no systematic loss of sea ice in the Arctic.